Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought a single yes could turn my life upside down. When my husband first made the request, I laughed, thinking he was joking, but the look in his eyes told me he was completely serious. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And now I wish I could turn back time. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's story, one that I never imagined I would be sharing. It's about trust, love, and the unexpected turns a marriage can take when one partner asks for something unthinkable. My husband and I have been together for years. We've had our ups and downs, just like any couple, but through it all, we always found our way back to each other. I believed we shared a deep understanding, a bond that couldn't be shaken, until the night he sat me down and made his request. At first, I thought I misheard him. Maybe he was testing me, seeing how I'd react. But the way he spoke, the way he held my hand, he was completely convinced that what he was asking for was normal, that it was something any loving wife would agree to. My stomach twisted, my heart pounded, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if I truly knew the man I married. I hesitated. I should have trusted my instincts, should have listened to that small voice inside screaming at me to walk away. But I didn't. Instead, I let his words sink in, let his reasoning cloud my judgment. I told myself, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this isn't as bad as it sounds. And so, I said yes. That one word, so small, so simple, changed everything. From that moment on, things were never the same between us. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke, it was like I had given him permission to become someone I didn't recognize. And now, I'm left wondering, was this always who he was? Or did my yes create something I can never undo? What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been asked something by a loved one that made you question everything? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to hear the rest of this story, keep watching, because trust me, it only gets worse from here. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation over and over again in my head. My husband was fast asleep beside me, breathing steadily, as if everything was perfectly normal. But it wasn't. It wasn't. I turned onto my side, watching his face in the dim light of the room. How could he be so calm after what he had asked of me? My mind raced with questions. Was I overreacting? Had I misunderstood? Or was this the first real glimpse of something I had been blind to all along? The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead, made his coffee, and talked about his day like we were just another ordinary couple. And for a moment, I wanted to believe that. I wanted to pretend everything was fine. But the truth lingered beneath the surface, making my stomach twist with unease. At work, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to our conversation. I wanted to talk to someone, to ask for advice, but how could I? How do you even begin to tell someone that the person you trust the most has asked you to do something that makes you question everything? When I got home that evening, I expected him to bring it up again. I braced myself for the conversation, ready to say that I had changed my mind, that I couldn't do it. But he didn't mention it, not a single word. Instead, he cooked dinner, poured me a glass of wine, and smiled at me like he always did. And that made it worse, because now I wasn't just uncomfortable, I was afraid. Had he accepted my answer so easily because he knew I wouldn't go back on it? Or was he waiting for the right moment, watching me, testing me? I found myself studying his every move, looking for signs. Signs of what? I didn't even know. But something inside me whispered that I needed to be careful. The following days were the same, normal, too normal. It felt like the calm before a storm, a silence so thick it made my skin crawl. And then, just when I started to believe I had imagined everything, that maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought, he did something that sent chills down my spine, something that made me realize there was no turning back now. That evening, as I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, I felt it, his eyes on me. I hadn't heard him come in, but when I turned around, he was there, leaning against the doorway, watching me. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice the weight of his stare. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice too light, too forced. He nodded, but something in his expression made my stomach tighten. Then, just as casually as if he were asking about dinner, he said, "I know you've been thinking about it." I froze, my hands still submerged in the soapy water. I knew exactly what he was talking about, but I didn't want to admit it. "Thinking about what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. His lips curled into a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know," a cold chill ran down my spine. For days, he had acted normal, like nothing had changed. But now, with just a few words, I realized he had been waiting, watching, letting me sit with the decision, knowing it would eat away at me. I wiped my hands on a towel and turned to fully face him. "I don't think this is a good idea," I finally said, choosing my words carefully. His expression didn't change. "You already said yes." I swallowed hard. "I know, but I—" He took a step closer, cutting me off. "You trust me, don't you?" That question? It felt like a trap. Of course I trusted him. He was my husband, the man I built a life with. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if my trust was a choice or a mistake. The air between us felt thick, charged with something unspoken. And then, just like that, he smiled, leaned in, and kissed my forehead. "It's okay," he murmured. "I know you'll do the right thing." And then he walked away. I stood there, heart hammering, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What did he mean by that? Was he testing me? And more importantly, what would happen if I changed my mind? I had never felt so trapped in my own marriage. What would you have done in my place? Do you think I should stick to my decision, or is it already too late to back out? Let me know in the comments and keep watching, because things are about to take a turn I never saw coming. I stood frozen in the dim light of the study, my heart beat so loud I swore he could hear it as he walked away. Every instinct screamed at me to go back upstairs, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But my feet stayed rooted to the floor, my gaze locked on the drawer he had just closed. I glanced toward the doorway, listening carefully. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I took a slow, shaky breath, then stepped forward. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle, my fingers barely brushing against the cool metal. And then, click. I jumped back, my breath catching in my throat. Footsteps. He was coming back. I barely had time to move before the floorboard creaked outside the study. I spun around, yanking open a random book from the shelf, pretending to be flipping through the pages as he stepped inside. "You're still here." His voice was light, but there was something unreadable in his tone. I forced a casual shrug, turning the page without really looking at it. I couldn't sleep. Thought maybe reading would help. Silence stretched between us. I felt his eyes on me, watching, waiting. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and then he did something that made my blood run cold. He walked over to the desk and locked the drawer. I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He smiled, that same knowing, unnerving smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." A chill ran down my spine. I forced a small laugh, closing the book and setting it back on the shelf. "You're acting weird," I said, hoping to keep the conversation light. "It's kind of creeping me out." He tilted his head slightly, studying me like he was trying to decide something. And then, as if he had come to a conclusion, he stepped forward and placed his hands on my shoulders. I just don't want you getting the wrong idea. The wrong idea about what? His grip tightened, just for a second, just enough for me to feel it. Then, just as quickly, he let go. You'll understand soon, he said softly. My stomach twisted. I didn't sleep that night, not because I wasn't tired, but because I was afraid to close my eyes, afraid of what I'd wake up to. And then, the next morning, it happened. The moment that changed everything. I woke up to find him gone. His side of the bed was cold, the house eerily silent. At first, I thought maybe he had gone for a walk. But when I stepped into the kitchen, I saw it. A note. Just 3 words. Don't look inside. What would you do? Would you listen? Or would you open the drawer and find out the truth? Let me know in the comments and stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. I stared at the note, my hands gripping the edges so tightly the paper crumpled beneath my fingers. Don't look inside. It felt less like a warning and more like a challenge. My breath came in short, uneven bursts as I stood there, debating. My husband was gone, but where? And why leave this note unless he knew I would be tempted? I told myself to walk away, to wait for him to come back and explain. But my feet were already moving, back to the study, back to the drawer, the locked drawer. I hesitated only for a second before yanking open the desk's top drawer, searching. My hands moved quickly, pulling out pens, paper clips, anything small enough to be a key. Then, buried beneath some loose papers, my fingers brushed against cold metal. My breath hitched. A key. His mistake was thinking I wouldn't look. With shaking hands, I fit the key into the lock, turning it slowly until I heard the soft click. I hesitated. Whatever was inside, was I ready to know? I pulled the drawer open. Inside, there was a small black box, and underneath it, a folded piece of paper with my name written on it. I grabbed the note first, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The words were scrawled in his familiar handwriting, rushed, uneven. I was going to tell you, but I needed time. Please, just trust me. I did this for us. My stomach twisted. Did what? I turned my attention to the box, my heart pounding as I slowly lifted the lid. And then, my breath caught. Inside was a single silver key, not a house key, not one I recognized. Beneath it, a slip of paper with an address written down. I felt the blood drain from my face. What was he hiding? And more importantly, where? A sound behind me made me jump. My head snapped up, my pulse roaring in my ears. He was standing in the doorway. His eyes flickered to the open drawer, then back to me. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look angry. He just sighed. I was hoping you'd wait. I gripped the key in my palm. What is this? Where does this go? He exhaled slowly, then took a step forward. I guess it's time you found out. Would you go? Would you follow him to the address? Or is this the moment to walk away? Let me know in the comments, and don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, the truth is worse than you think. I stood there, gripping the key so tightly it left marks on my palm. My husband's expression remained calm, unreadable, but I could see it now, the weight behind his eyes. He had expected this moment. Maybe he had even planned for it. I deserve the truth, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded. Then let's go. The drive to the address was silent. My mind spun with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Was he hiding money? A secret life? Or was it something much, much worse? The car rolled to a stop in front of an unfamiliar house, modern, sleek, like something out of a luxury magazine. My heart pounded as I stepped out. The key fit perfectly. The door swung open. Inside, the air was still. The space was perfectly furnished, like someone had been living here. My breath caught when I saw framed photos on the mantel of me, of us. But these weren't pictures from our home. These were different, taken at angles I'd never seen, in moments I didn't remember being photographed. I turned to him, my hands shaking. "What is this?" He exhaled, his gaze soft. "I bought this house for us." I stared. "What?" "I wanted to surprise you. I know things have felt off between us. I thought if we had a fresh start, a new space, maybe things would feel like they used to." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I wanted to tell you, but then I asked you to trust me, and I could see the doubt in your eyes. I thought if you found out on your own, maybe you'd understand." I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the storm of emotions inside me. Why all the secrecy, the locked drawer, the notes? He gave a small, tired smile. "Because I was scared you'd say no." I let out a slow breath, my pulse still racing. All this time, I had been preparing for something terrible, but instead, I had found something I never expected, a man trying desperately to hold on to what we had. I looked around the house, at the life he had envisioned for us, and for the first time in weeks, I let my guard down. "Next time," I whispered, "just ask me." He reached for my hand, and I let him. "What would you have done? Would you forgive him for keeping a secret like this? Or is trust something you can't rebuild?" Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see what happens next, maybe this isn't the end after all.